If you have ever whispered the words, "I love God," without truly feeling the weight of what that means, then what you are about to hear may change everything inside you. Because loving God is not just a feeling. It is not just a moment during a prayer or a tear that falls when a worship song touches your heart. It is a fire that consumes your decisions, your thoughts, your desires, your hidden places. And today, something deeper is being revealed to you, something many hear, but few truly live. Right now, before anything else, I want you to take a step of faith. Not tomorrow, not later. Right now. Go into the comments and write this simple but powerful declaration. Today, I choose to love God with all that I am. This is not just a sentence. It is a spiritual positioning. It is a line being drawn in the unseen realm. And as you write it, something begins to align inside your spirit. Because the truth is, most people believe they love God, but they still hold parts of their heart back. They still reserve areas of their life where fear speaks louder than faith, where control replaces surrender, where comfort becomes more important than obedience. And without realizing it, they live divided, half in, half out, half surrendered, half resisting. But what if I told you that the command to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength is not just a command? It is the key to a transformed life. Not a perfect life, not a problem-free life, but a life anchored, unshaken, deeply rooted in something eternal. A life where anxiety loses its grip, where identity becomes clear, where purpose stops feeling distant. There are truths in this message that go beyond surface-level understanding. There are spiritual insights that will confront you, heal you, and awaken something inside you that may have been asleep for years. And if you stay until the end, we are going to enter into a moment of prayer together that has the power to realign your heart in a way you may have never experienced before. And if this message is already stirring something within you, don't ignore it. This is not coincidence. This is not just another video appearing randomly in your day. There is intention behind this moment. There is a divine orchestration happening that is calling you into something deeper. Stay connected, stay present, because when you begin to walk in alignment with the Spirit, your life stops being random and starts becoming purposeful. But understand this, what you are about to hear is not just comforting, it is confronting. Because true love for God demands something. It asks you to release what you've been holding on to. It invites you to trust where you've been afraid. It calls you to surrender even when it doesn't make sense. And that is where most people hesitate. Still, there is something coming in the final part of this journey that may open your eyes in a way you didn't expect, a revelation that many overlook, yet it carries the weight to shift how you see your relationship with God forever, and you don't want to miss that. So stay with me until the end, because hidden in this message may be the exact key your soul has been searching for, the answer to a question you haven't even been able to put into words yet. And before we continue, I want to invite you into something powerful. Wherever you are watching from, write it in the comments, not just as information, but as a spiritual connection. Because what is happening here is not individual, it is collective. This is a global movement of hearts turning back to God, of lives being aligned, of people choosing surrender over resistance. And as you declare where you are from, you become part of this living chain of faith, stretching across nations, languages, and stories. Now listen carefully, because what comes next is not just teaching, it is an invitation, an awakening, a moment that may mark the beginning of something entirely new in your life. Teaching 1. There is a moment recorded in Scripture that many people have heard, but few have truly paused to feel. It happens when a man approaches Jesus and asks what seems like a simple question, but it carries eternal weight. He asks, which commandment is the greatest of all? And Jesus responds with words that are both clear and deeply unsettling if we truly take them seriously. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Not part of your heart, not most of your life, not when it feels convenient, all. And if we are honest, this is where the struggle begins, because loving God with all your heart sounds beautiful until your heart is wounded, until disappointment enters your story, until prayers seem unanswered, until life does not unfold the way you expected. In those moments, the heart begins to protect itself. It pulls back. It becomes cautious. It starts loving God with conditions instead of surrender. Think about the last time you lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling that quiet weight in your chest. Not necessarily a dramatic pain, but a subtle heaviness. The kind that doesn't scream, it lingers. The kind that makes you question things without even forming full thoughts. That moment reveals something. It reveals where your heart truly is. Because loving God with all your heart means allowing Him into that space too. Not just the parts of you that are strong, joyful, and full of faith, but also the parts that feel tired, confused, and even disappointed. It means choosing not to hide from Him when you don't understand, but instead leaning in, even when it feels uncomfortable. David understood this in a way that still speaks across generations. When you read the Psalms, you don't see a man pretending to be okay. You see someone pouring out everything: joy, fear, anger, hope, confusion. He did not filter his emotions before bringing them to God. And that is exactly why he was called a man after God's own heart. Not because he was perfect, but because he was fully open. Loving God with all your heart is not about having perfect emotions. It is about having an honest connection. And then comes the soul. The soul is deeper. It is not just what you feel. It is who you are when no one is watching. It is your identity, your inner world, the silent conversations you have with yourself. And this is where many people struggle even more, because the soul is often shaped by past experiences, by words spoken over you, by things you went through that you never fully healed from. Maybe somewhere along the way, you started believing that you were not enough. Maybe you carry a quiet sense of rejection, even if you don't talk about it. Maybe you've learned to function, to smile, to move forward, but deep inside, there is still a question about your worth. And here is where loving God with all your soul becomes transformative. Because it means allowing God to redefine who you are, not based on what happened to you, but based on what He says about you. It means letting His truth speak louder than your past. It means surrendering the identity built on pain and receiving the identity rooted in His love. This is not an instant process. It is a journey. But every step of that journey begins with a decision to trust His voice over every other voice that has tried to define you. And then there is strength. This is where things become very real, very practical, and sometimes very challenging. Loving God with all your strength means involving your actions, your choices, your daily life. It means that love is not just something you feel or believe. It is something you live. It shows up in how you respond when you are offended. It shows up in the decisions you make when no one else is watching. It shows up in whether you choose integrity when compromise would be easier. It shows up in whether you continue trusting even when circumstances are not changing yet. Think about Abraham. When God asked him to leave everything familiar and go to a place he had never seen, that was not comfortable. That was not easy. But it was love expressed through obedience. It was trust in action. And that is what makes this kind of love different. It is not passive. It is active. It moves. It stretches, it grows. There is something powerful happening even now as you listen to this, because you are not here by accident. Something in your spirit recognizes that there is more than routine, more than surface-level faith, more than just going through the motions. And maybe, without even realizing it, you have already started leaning in. If this message is touching something inside you, don't keep it only to yourself. Think about someone who might also be in a place of searching, someone who might be quietly carrying questions, someone who might need this exact reminder. Sometimes sharing a word is not just an action. It becomes an answer to someone else's prayer. But stay attentive, because what we are uncovering here is only the beginning. There are deeper layers to what it truly means to love God in a way that transforms everything. And as we move forward, you may begin to recognize areas of your life that God is gently inviting you to surrender, not to take something from you, but to give you something greater. And what comes next may challenge the way you have understood love, faith, and surrender until now. Teaching 2. There is a quiet tension that many people carry without even realizing it. It lives in the space between what they say they believe and how they actually live when no one is watching. It is not always obvious. It does not always shout, but it reveals itself in small, almost invisible moments. And this is where loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength begins to confront something deeper: divided loyalty. Because the truth is, the human heart has a tendency to split its allegiance. Part of it wants God, part of it wants control, part of it trusts, part of it fears losing what feels safe. And this internal division creates a subtle instability, like a foundation that looks strong on the surface but shifts under pressure. Jesus addressed this directly when he said that no one can serve two masters. Not because he wanted to impose rules, but because he understood something about the nature of the heart. What you give your devotion to will eventually shape your decisions, your priorities, and your direction. Think about the story of the rich young ruler. He approached Jesus with sincerity. He had followed the commandments. He had lived a morally upright life. On the outside, everything seemed aligned, but when Jesus invited him to go deeper, to release what he valued most and follow him fully, the man hesitated, and then he walked away. It was not that he did not believe. It was that something else held a stronger grip on his heart. And that is where this message becomes personal. Because loving God with all your heart means there is no hidden competitor for his place. It means there is no silent agreement with fear, no secret attachment that you are unwilling to surrender, no identity you protect more than your relationship with him. But here is where many people misunderstand this kind of surrender. They think it means losing themselves. They think it means giving up joy, personality, or individuality. But in reality, it is the opposite. Because when you remove what competes with God, you begin to discover who you were always meant to be. There is a freedom that comes when your heart is no longer divided. And yet, the process of getting there is not always comfortable. It often begins with awareness, moments where you notice that your reactions don't align with your faith, moments where anxiety rises even though you know God is in control, moments where you hold on to something tightly even while praying for peace. These are not moments of failure, they are moments of revelation. Because God does not expose these areas to condemn you. He reveals them to invite you into deeper alignment. Think about Elijah on Mount Carmel. The people of Israel were caught between two positions. They were trying to honor God, while also keeping their connection to Baal. And Elijah stood before them and asked a question that still echoes today. How long will you waver between two opinions? That question is not just historical, it is personal. How long will you stay in the middle? How long will you try to balance surrender with control? How long will you allow fear to have a voice equal to faith? Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength is not about perfection. It is about direction. It is about choosing again and again to move toward Him, even when part of you feels resistant. And this is where something powerful begins to shift. When you stop trying to manage everything on your own, when you stop negotiating with your fears, when you stop holding on to what feels safe but keeps you limited, you create space for God to move in ways you could not have orchestrated yourself. There is a kind of peace that only comes when your heart is fully aligned, not because everything around you is perfect, but because everything inside you is anchored. And maybe, as you hear this, something is being uncovered within you. A place where you have been holding back, a situation where you have been trying to stay in control, a fear that has quietly been influencing your decisions. If that is happening, don't push it away. Don't ignore it. Bring it into the light. Even now you can acknowledge it. You can say, in your own words, God, this is where I've been divided. This is where I've been holding on. And I choose to trust you here. That simple moment of honesty has more power than you think. And as you continue walking through this message, you may begin to feel a deeper sense of clarity forming inside you, a clearer understanding of what it truly means to love God beyond words, beyond routine, beyond surface-level faith. There are layers to this kind of love that many never explore. Depths that remain untouched because they require surrender, trust, and a willingness to let go of what feels familiar. But what is coming next will take this even further, because loving God with all your strength is not only about what you release, it is also about what you choose to build moving forward. And that is where transformation becomes visible. Teaching 3. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when love stops being something you say and starts becoming something that costs you, not in a way that takes life from you, but in a way that reveals what truly holds your heart. Because loving God with all your strength is not just about surrendering what is comfortable, it is about choosing Him in the moments where obedience feels inconvenient, where faith feels stretched, and where your natural instincts want to go in a different direction. This is where many people quietly step back, not because they don't believe, but because love, when it becomes action, demands consistency. It asks for alignment not just in the visible parts of life, but in the hidden rhythms of your daily choices. Think about Daniel. He lived in a place where honoring God was not the norm. In fact, it was dangerous. There were pressures all around him to conform, to blend in, to adjust his devotion to fit the environment. But Daniel did something simple and at the same time incredibly powerful. He remained consistent. He prayed when it was easy. He prayed when it was difficult. He prayed when it was safe. And he prayed when it could cost him everything. That is what loving God with all your strength looks like. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is found in quiet decisions, in choosing integrity when no one is watching, in choosing patience when your emotions are pushing you toward reaction, in choosing trust when your mind is filled with questions. It is in those moments that your love becomes visible. And here is something important to understand. Your strength is not just about physical energy or effort. It is about where you direct your life. It is about what you prioritize. It is about how you respond when life presses against you. Because pressure reveals alignment. When something challenges you, what comes out of you? Is it fear? Is it frustration? Is it doubt? Or is there something deeper anchoring your response? This is not about judging yourself. It is about recognizing where your strength is currently rooted. Because loving God with all your strength means that even under pressure, your foundation does not shift. It reminds us of Jesus in the wilderness. After fasting for 40 days, physically weakened, he was confronted with temptation. And each temptation was not random. It was targeted. It touched on hunger, identity, and authority. It was designed to pull him away from alignment with the Father. But Jesus responded with something greater than immediate need or emotional reaction. He responded with truth. He remained anchored, not because it was easy, but because his strength was rooted in something unshakable. And this reveals something essential for you today. Your strength grows where your connection with God deepens. It is not about trying harder in your own ability. It is about staying connected in a way that transforms how you think, how you respond, and how you live. There are moments when you will feel tired, moments when doing the right thing feels heavier than giving in, moments when consistency feels like a struggle instead of a natural flow. But those are the exact moments where your love is being refined. Because real love is not proven when everything feels good. It is revealed when you choose God, even when your emotions are not leading you there. Maybe you've experienced this in small ways, choosing to forgive when you would rather hold on to the pain, choosing to stay honest when it would be easier to compromise, choosing to remain faithful in prayer even when you don't feel anything changing. These are not small actions, these are expressions of love, and as you continue in them, something begins to shift inside you. What once felt like effort starts becoming identity. What once required discipline starts becoming desire. What once felt like sacrifice starts becoming freedom. This is the transformation that happens when love moves from words to action. And even now, as you reflect on your own life, you may begin to recognize areas where God is inviting you to strengthen your alignment. Not out of pressure, but out of purpose. Not to restrict you, but to free you. Because every place where your life aligns with Him becomes a place where His peace, His clarity, and His presence can flow more freely. If this is speaking to you, take a moment to internalize it. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need a willing heart, a heart that says, God, I choose you here too. And as you continue, what comes next will take you even deeper into something many overlook, because loving God fully is not only about your private life, it also transforms how you relate to others, how you see people, and how you carry His presence into the world around you. And that changes everything. Teaching 4. There is something that happens when your love for God becomes real, consistent, and alive within you. It begins to overflow. It no longer stays contained in your private prayers or quiet moments. It starts shaping how you see people, how you respond to them, and how you carry yourself in situations that once triggered you. Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength does not end in you. It transforms you, and then it flows through you. This is why Jesus connected 2 commandments so closely that they almost became one: to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. Not because they are separate, but because one reveals the authenticity of the other. You can say you love God, but the evidence of that love often appears in how you treat people when they don't deserve it. And this is where things become deeply real. Because it is easy to feel connected to God when you are alone, when the environment is peaceful, when nothing is challenging your emotions. But what happens when someone disrespects you, when someone misunderstands you, when someone hurts you in a way that lingers? That is where your love is tested. Think about Joseph. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and forgotten in prison. If anyone had a reason to carry bitterness, to close his heart, to protect himself from trusting again, it was him. And yet, when the moment came for him to confront those who had hurt him, he responded with something unexpected. He chose mercy. He chose to see beyond the pain and recognize that God had been working through everything, even through what was meant to harm him. That kind of response does not come from human effort alone. It comes from a heart that has been shaped by God. Because when you truly love God with all your heart, you begin to see people differently. You begin to understand that everyone is carrying something. Everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. Everyone has areas of brokenness, even if they hide it well. And this awareness changes your reactions. It does not mean you allow harmful behavior. It does not mean you ignore boundaries. But it means that your heart does not become hardened. It means you do not let offense define your identity or dictate your responses. There is a quiet strength in choosing love when it would be easier to choose distance or resentment. And this is where many people struggle, because loving others in this way requires something deeper than emotion. It requires a connection to God that continuously fills you, renews you, and strengthens you. Because on your own, there will be moments where you feel empty, moments where you feel like you have nothing left to give, moments where loving someone feels like too much. But when your source is God, love becomes something you receive before it becomes something you give. Think about Jesus on the cross. In one of the most painful, unjust, and overwhelming moments in human history, he looked at those who were responsible for his suffering and said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." That is not natural. That is divine, and it reveals something profound. When your love for God is complete, it produces a love in you that goes beyond human limitation. This does not happen instantly. It is not a switch you turn on overnight. It is a process, a transformation that unfolds as you continue choosing God, as you continue surrendering, as you continue allowing Him to shape your heart. And along this journey, you will notice something changing inside you. Situations that once would have triggered you will begin to lose their power. Words that once would have stayed in your mind for days will begin to fade more quickly. Reactions that once felt automatic will start to shift into responses that reflect something deeper. This is not weakness. This is strength under control. This is what it looks like when love is no longer just something you feel, but something that defines you. And maybe, as you listen, there is someone who comes to your mind, someone you've struggled with, someone whose actions left a mark, someone you've kept at a distance emotionally. You don't have to resolve everything right now, but you can begin with a simple step. You can bring that person before God, not with perfect words, not with forced emotions, but with honesty. Because sometimes healing begins not when everything feels resolved, but when you are willing to open that space to God. And as you continue in this journey, something even deeper will be revealed, because loving God fully is not only about how you feel, how you act, or how you relate to others. It also reshapes how you handle the unseen battles within you, the thoughts you fight, the doubts you carry, the internal voices that try to pull you away from truth. And what comes next will begin to expose and transform that inner battlefield in a way that many overlook, but few can ignore once they see it. Teaching 5. There is a battle that does not make noise, yet it shapes almost everything in your life. It happens in silence, in the space of your thoughts, in the conversations you have within yourself that no one else can hear. And this is where loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength reaches a level that many people never fully explore, the battlefield of the mind. Because you can say the right words, you can even do the right actions. But if your thoughts are constantly pulling you in the opposite direction, you will feel divided inside. You will feel unstable, even when everything around you seems fine. And this is not random. The mind is one of the most strategic places where your alignment with God is either strengthened or weakened. Think about Eve in the garden. The serpent did not begin with an action. It began with a thought, a suggestion, a question that planted doubt. Did God really say? That single moment introduced something powerful. It shifted her focus from trust to questioning, from clarity to confusion. And once the thought was accepted, the action followed. This is how it still works today. Most of the battles you face do not start externally, they begin internally. A thought enters your mind, and if it is not recognized for what it is, it begins to grow. It begins to shape your emotions, influence your perspective, and eventually guide your decisions. And here is where loving God with all your mind becomes essential, even though the original command speaks of heart, soul, and strength, because your mind is the gateway through which those three are expressed. If your thoughts are constantly filled with fear, it becomes difficult for your heart to remain at peace. If your thoughts are shaped by lies, your identity begins to feel unstable. If your thoughts are scattered, your strength becomes inconsistent. But when your mind begins to align with truth, everything starts to shift. This is why Paul writes about the renewing of the mind. Not adjusting it slightly, not improving it a little, renewing it. That means replacing old patterns, old beliefs, old internal dialogues with something new, something rooted in truth, not in past experiences, not in fear, not in insecurity. And this is where many people struggle, because thoughts feel automatic. They feel uncontrollable. They come quickly, sometimes without invitation, and they seem to carry weight. But not every thought deserves your agreement. This is a key understanding. Just because a thought appears does not mean it belongs to you. Jesus demonstrated this clearly in the wilderness. When the enemy presented thoughts to him, he did not entertain them. He did not analyze them deeply. He responded with truth immediately. He did not allow the thought to take root. And this is where your authority begins. Loving God with all your strength includes how you respond to your thoughts. It includes the discipline of recognizing what aligns with truth and what does not. It means that when a thought tells you that you are not enough, you don't just sit with it. You bring it into the light and confront it with what God says about you. When a thought tells you that things will never change, you don't accept it as reality. You remind yourself that God is still working even when you cannot see it. When a thought tries to pull you into anxiety about the future, you redirect your focus to the present, to the faithfulness of God that has already carried you through things you once thought you wouldn't survive. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about choosing what you allow to take root inside you. And this is a process. There will be moments when your mind feels crowded, when thoughts come faster than you can process them, when emotions try to follow those thoughts and amplify them. But even in those moments, you have a choice. You can pause, you can breathe, you can bring your attention back to God. Even a simple internal whisper, "God, help me align my thoughts with your truth," begins to shift something. Because you are not fighting this battle alone. The Holy Spirit works within you, guiding you, reminding you, strengthening you, but alignment requires participation. It requires your willingness to engage, to redirect, to remain aware. And as you continue doing this, something begins to change. The thoughts that once dominated your mind start to lose their intensity. The patterns that once felt automatic begin to weaken. The space inside your mind becomes quieter, clearer, more stable. This is not because life becomes easier, but because your inner world becomes anchored, and from that place, your heart finds peace more easily. Your soul feels more secure. Your strength becomes more consistent. Everything connects. And maybe, as you are hearing this, you are recognizing certain thought patterns that have been shaping your days. Patterns you may not have questioned before. Voices that have felt familiar even if they were not true. If that is happening, don't ignore it. Awareness is the beginning of transformation. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to have perfect control over every thought. But you can begin to observe, to recognize, and to gently realign, because what is coming next will take you even deeper into something many overlook. Not just how you think, but how you trust. And trust is where love either grows or stops. Teaching 6. There is a place where love either deepens or quietly fades, and that place is called trust. Not the kind of trust that exists when everything is going well, when answers come quickly, and when life feels predictable, but the kind of trust that is tested in silence, in waiting, in uncertainty. Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength will eventually bring you to moments where you don't understand what He is doing. And this is where many people struggle, not because they don't love God, but because they expected clarity. And instead they found mystery. They expected immediate answers. And instead, they found waiting. They expected relief. And instead, they found a process. And in those moments, something begins to rise inside the heart. Questions, doubts, a quiet tension between what you believe and what you feel. Think about Abraham again. God gave him a promise that seemed impossible, that he would become the father of many nations, and yet years passed without any visible fulfillment. Time moved, circumstances remained the same, and everything around him seemed to contradict the promise he had received. And then, when the promise finally began to take form, God asked something even more difficult. He asked Abraham to place Isaac, the very embodiment of that promise, on the altar. That moment was not just about obedience, it was about trust at its deepest level. Because Abraham had to choose whether he trusted God more than he trusted what he could see, what he could hold, what he could understand. And this is where loving God with all your soul becomes real. Because the soul resists uncertainty. It wants stability. It wants to feel secure. It wants to know what is coming next. But trust invites you into something different. It invites you to rest in God even when the path is not fully visible. And that is not easy. There are moments when you pray and feel nothing. Moments when you ask for direction and hear silence. Moments when you do everything you believe is right, and yet things still don't change immediately. And in those moments, the temptation is to step back, to rely on your own understanding, to take control again. But there is something powerful about choosing to remain, choosing to trust, even when your emotions are unsettled, choosing to stay aligned, even when your mind is full of questions, choosing to believe that God is still working, even when you cannot see the evidence yet. Because trust is not built in clarity, it is built in consistency. It is built in the quiet decision to keep moving forward with God, even when the path feels uncertain. Think about the disciples in the storm. They were in the boat, surrounded by waves, feeling the instability, hearing the wind, seeing the danger. And Jesus was there, but asleep. From their perspective, it felt like abandonment, like absence, like something was wrong. But the reality was very different. Jesus had not left them. He was present even in the silence, and this is something you need to understand deeply. God's silence is not his absence. There are moments when he is working in ways that are not immediately visible, moments when he is shaping something beneath the surface, preparing something that requires time, alignment, and growth. And if he revealed everything all at once, it might overwhelm you instead of strengthening you. So trust becomes the bridge between where you are and where God is leading you. And as you walk that bridge, something begins to change inside you. You become less dependent on immediate answers, less controlled by external circumstances, more anchored in something deeper. Your peace becomes less fragile. Your faith becomes more steady. Your love becomes more complete. Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength means that even in uncertainty, your connection with him does not break. It remains, it holds, it continues. And maybe right now you are in a moment like this, a place where you are waiting, a place where things are not fully clear, a place where you are trying to understand what God is doing. If that is where you are, don't rush out of it. There is something being formed in you that cannot be built in comfort. There is a depth of trust that is being developed, a strength that is being shaped, a connection that is becoming more real, even if you don't feel it fully yet. And in this process, you are not alone. There are others walking this same path, others learning to trust beyond what they can see, others choosing to remain, even when it would be easier to step back. And as you continue in this journey, something even deeper will begin to unfold, because trust leads to surrender, and surrender is where transformation becomes complete. What comes next will take you into that place, where control is released and something greater begins to take its place. Teaching 7. There is a moment in the journey of faith where trust is no longer enough on its own. It begins to open the door to something deeper, something more defining. That place is surrender. Not the kind of surrender that feels like defeat, but the kind that brings alignment. The kind that releases the weight you were never meant to carry. The kind that shifts your life from striving into resting in something greater than yourself. Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength will eventually bring you to a question that cannot be avoided. What are you still holding on to? Not on the surface, not the obvious things, but the deeper areas. The ones you rarely talk about, the ones you justify, the ones that feel too important to release. It could be control, the need to know how everything will unfold, the need to have answers before you move, the desire to feel secure based on what you can predict or manage. Or it could be identity, a version of yourself you've built over time, a way of seeing yourself that feels familiar, even if it's rooted in past pain, past labels, or past experiences. Or it could be something even quieter, a fear you've learned to live with, a pattern you've grown used to, a comfort zone that feels safe, even though it keeps you limited. And here is the truth. Surrender begins where your control ends. Think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is one of the most human moments recorded in Scripture. Jesus knew what was ahead. He understood the pain, the weight, the cost. And in that moment, he expressed something real. He asked if there was another way. That honesty matters, because surrender does not mean you don't feel the weight. It does not mean you don't experience the tension. It means that even in the presence of those emotions, you choose alignment. Not my will, but yours be done. That is surrender. And that is where love becomes complete. Because it is easy to love God when His will aligns with your expectations, when the path feels clear, when the outcome feels favorable. But true love reveals itself when you choose Him, even when the path is difficult, even when the outcome is uncertain, even when your natural instincts want to move in a different direction. This is where many hesitate, because surrender feels like loss before it feels like freedom. It feels like letting go of control before you realize you were never truly in control. It feels like stepping into the unknown before you discover that God has already gone ahead of you. But something powerful happens when you take that step, when you release what you've been holding on to, when you stop trying to manage everything, when you allow God to take His rightful place in every area of your life. A new kind of peace begins to emerge. Not a fragile peace that depends on circumstances, a steady peace that comes from alignment. This is what Paul described when he spoke about a peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that doesn't always make sense externally, but internally it anchors you. And this is where surrender becomes transformative, because it changes how you carry your life. Instead of constantly trying to figure everything out, you begin to trust more deeply. Instead of reacting out of fear, you begin to respond from a place of alignment. Instead of feeling the need to control every outcome, you begin to rest in the knowledge that God is working, even in ways you cannot see. And maybe, as you hear this, there is something specific coming to your mind. Something you've been holding on to, something you've been trying to control, something you've been hesitant to release. You don't have to force the process. You don't have to pretend it's easy. But you can begin with a simple step. Acknowledgement. God, this is what I've been holding on to. That moment of honesty is powerful, because surrender is not about perfection. It is about willingness. And as you continue in that willingness, something begins to shift. What once felt heavy begins to feel lighter. What once felt uncertain begins to feel guided. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable, not because everything changes instantly, but because your position changes. You are no longer carrying things alone. And this is where love reaches a deeper level, because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength means that there is no part of your life outside of His presence. No area where you say, "This is mine, I will handle this." Instead, everything becomes an offering. Everything becomes aligned, and in that alignment there is freedom, there is clarity, there is direction. And as you step into this place of surrender, something even greater begins to unfold, because surrender is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a life that is fully led. And what comes next will reveal what happens when you stop leading yourself and start allowing God to guide every step. Teaching 8. There is a moment when everything you have heard, everything that has been revealed to your heart through this journey, begins to come together in a way that is no longer just understanding, but transformation. Because loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength is not just a concept to reflect on. It is a decision that must be sealed, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but now. Because if you are honest, something inside you has already been shifting. Maybe it was subtle, maybe it was quiet, but you felt it. That inner stirring, that awareness that there is more, that you were not created to live a divided life, a distracted life, a life where God only occupies a portion of who you are. You were created for fullness, and fullness begins with surrender, but it is established through commitment. Think about Joshua standing before the people of Israel after everything they had seen, after everything God had done. He did not give them a passive invitation. He gave them a decision. Choose this day whom you will serve. And not someday, this day. And then he made his own position clear. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That is what this moment is for you. Not just inspiration, decision. Because loving God with all your heart means there is no hidden place reserved for fear, resentment, or divided loyalty. Loving Him with all your soul means your identity is no longer shaped by your past, your wounds, or your doubts, but by His truth. And loving Him with all your strength means your life begins to reflect that love in action, in consistency, in obedience, in direction. This is not about becoming perfect. This is about becoming aligned. And alignment changes everything, because when your heart, your soul, and your strength are aligned with God, your life stops feeling fragmented. You stop feeling like you're being pulled in different directions. You stop living in internal conflict. Instead, there is clarity, there is peace, there is purpose. Not because everything around you becomes easy, but because everything inside you becomes anchored. And maybe now you understand something deeper, that the restlessness you felt, the internal tension, the sense that something was missing, was never because you were broken beyond repair. It was because your heart was being called into alignment. And today, you are responding. Right now, I want you to do something simple but powerful. In your own words, or even silently if you prefer, make this decision clear before God. God, I give you all of me, not just parts, not just moments, all of me. Let that settle inside you, because this is not just a phrase, it is a positioning of your life. And now, we are going to seal this moment together. Wherever you are, if possible, close your eyes for a moment, and let this prayer become your own. Father, right now I come before you, not with perfection, but with sincerity. You see my heart, you see every part of me, the areas that are strong and the areas that still need healing. And today, I choose to stop holding back. I choose to love you with all my heart. Remove anything inside me that competes with you, any fear, any distraction, any attachment that keeps me divided. Bring my heart into full alignment with yours. I choose to love you with all my soul. Heal what has been wounded, restore what has been broken, silence every voice that has tried to define me outside of your truth. Let my identity be rooted in who you say I am, and I choose to love you with all my strength. Teach me to live this love daily. in my choices, in my actions, in my responses. Even when it is not easy, even when it requires surrender, even when it stretches me beyond what feels comfortable. God, I release control. I release the need to understand everything. I release the weight I was never meant to carry, and I trust you. Lead me, shape me, transform me. From this day forward, let my life reflect a love that is real, complete, and unshakable. In Jesus' name, amen. Take a moment. Don't rush this. Something has just been established inside you. And if this prayer spoke to your heart, you can seal this moment publicly in a simple way. In the comments, write, "I choose to love God with all that I am." Not for others, but as a declaration of what has just begun in you. And if you've stayed until this moment, truly, from the beginning to now, there is something special about your hunger, about your willingness, about your openness to go deeper. This is not common, and you are not alone. There is a community here, people from different places, different stories, but with one desire: to grow, to align, to walk closer with God. If you want to continue strengthening this journey, there are more messages waiting for you on the screen now. Messages that will help you deepen this connection, strengthen your faith, and continue walking in this alignment you've just stepped into. Stay in this path, because when you love God with all your heart, soul, and strength, your life will never be the same again.